Hello, everyone, and welcome to PS Paul Stewart. I'm Paul, and today we're going to bring you another wonderful guest talking about life and experience and adventure. But let me just tell you a little bit about myself first. I'm a personal trainer and facilitator of well-being. I like to mentor people and coach people, and I always consider the mind, body, spirit approach. I've been based around the world a little bit. Currently, I'm in Japan and I've met some wonderful people and had some wonderful experiences. And that brings me to our guest today, Alexander Bennett, Kendo practitioner, university professor, quite prolific writer, and genuine good guy, and fellow Kiwi. Alex, welcome, welcome.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's great to see you again. 明けましておめでとうございます。
Thank you.
今年もよろしくお願いしますね。It's bloody cold here in Kyoto, man.
Well, I'm in Tokyo. It doesn't seem to get it quite as much, but we have been told there might be a little snow next Tuesday, which I'm really excited about. I love it. But how about you?
No, I could do without it, to be honest. It's nice for the first, few minutes when you see the beautiful snow falling from the sky. But yeah, once it starts restricting your movement, as it did with me this morning with my car, it becomes a bit of a pain in the backside, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to my favorite sushi chef yesterday, and I said he told me this weather forecast, and I said, "Oh, I was very excited." He looked at me like there was something wrong with me, like I said, "No, I understand. You look at the buildings and the roads; it's not attractive, but you go into the shrine or amongst the trees, it's so beautiful, isn't it?"
Yeah. Well, there's no denying that. There's no denying that. But you can't stay in the shrines and the trees all day, can you?
Oh, I'm giving it my best shot.
Fair enough.
Hey, Alex, tell us a little bit about your roots. We're both Kiwis. We've both got that in common. But tell us a little bit about your New Zealand homeland and perhaps a little bit about the sports you're involved in and your academic work as a child.
Okay. I wasn't doing much academic work as a child, that's for sure. But I was born and bred in Christchurch, which is the South Island of New Zealand. I came to Japan for the first time when I was 17, as a high school student on a Rotary Club exchange for 1 year. And so I came from Christchurch to Chiba, Chiba Prefecture, which is just outside Tokyo, not too far away from where you are. And I stayed there for 1 year as a typical Japanese high school student, not a Japanese high school student, but a Japanese high school student. And that was when I started my journey in Kendo. I'd never done Kendo before, Kendo being the Japanese martial art of swordsmanship. I'd never done Kendo before, but I'd always been an avid sports enthusiast. As a kid, I used to play a lot of soccer and also a lot of cricket, as many Kiwi kids do. I never really got into rugby, although I love watching it. Mum wouldn't let me do it because I'm too small. She was scared I was going to get beaten up. So I sort of got my own back by doing something like Kendo, where I do get beat up a lot.
Yeah. Did you, when you were a young child, did you have any inklings or indications that Japan was of interest to you?
Yeah, I've always been interested in Japan. I'd always been interested in foreign countries in general. I remember I've memories of going to the primary school library and getting books out on not so much about the countries themselves, but folk tales, fairy tales, and stuff from various cultures used to really intrigue me. And I remember one story or storybook that I read that was about fireflies. And it was a story from Japan, and that sort of intrigued me. And I remember always having this kind of strange attraction to Japan from a very young age, probably about 6 or 7. Never obviously thinking that I'd get here, but it sort of became a little bit closer when I went to high school in Christchurch, Shirley Boys High School. At the time, and this was the early to mid 1980s. At the time, it was one of the few high schools in Japan that offered Japanese language instruction. Of course, foreign languages in New Zealand schools have always been a part of our education there, but it's mainly been European languages. So to have Japanese, and at the time, mid 80s, of course, New Zealand was going through a bit of an economic slump, and Japan was really flexing its economic muscle. I think the word or the term economic animal was bandied about with much enthusiasm in the day. And I don't know if you're in New Zealand at the time, Paul, but in the 80s, we started seeing a massive influx of Japanese tourists. So to learn Japanese, I thought, would be a wonderful feather in my cap for a future career in something, whatever that be.
Yeah.
And so I took to Japanese language studies at high school with much enthusiasm, and it got to the stage where my Japanese language teacher said, "Well, if you want to get, really good, now's the time you should think about going on an exchange program to Japan." And that's exactly what I did. So yeah, one thing led to another, and I ended up over here. Well, for 1 year, I got hooked on kendo.
Yes.
And I went back to New Zealand for another year thinking about university. But then I thought, no, I want to go back and do more kendo. And over 30 years later, here I am still.
Yeah, as a well-established Bennett sensei or teacher, highly regarded internationally and locally as well, I believe.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't go that far, mate. But
well, could you maybe, for viewers that are watching that are not familiar with the kendo, could you give a general description of the art?
Well, maybe I could start off with my first impressions of kendo when I saw it. When I came to the high school in Japan, which was called Inage High School, it was suggested, like any other Japanese high school kid, that perhaps I join a club, and I wanted to join the soccer club because soccer was really my passion. And I saw the soccer ground that they play on, which was basically something out of the Gobi Desert. There wasn't a lot of grass anywhere, and it just didn't seem like a very good environment to get stuck into soccer, although I was still very keen. It's just like, wow, you can't play soccer on gravel, for crying out loud. And then it was my host mother who suggested I do something a little bit more Japanese in my time here, and kendo or judo were the only two sort of martial arts clubs that were on offer at my school. So I went and checked out kendo for the first time, and I'd never seen it before. And the second I walked into the dojo, it blew my mind. Not necessarily in a good way either. It was actually very frightening, seeing all these people just screaming at the top of their lungs and charging in at each other and whacking each other with bamboo sticks. And I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand. Actually, behind the madness is a lot of finesse and a lot of strategy and incredible skill and dexterity. It just looked like a violent free-for-all. And I guess the screaming as well was what really sort of frightened me. So my first impression was, I wouldn't say it was particularly good, but at the same time, it was also very fascinating.
Yes.
Because it really, in my very narrow-minded understanding of Japan at the time, it sort of epitomized a lot of my preconceived notions about kamikaze and samurai and all sorts of crazy stuff, right? So I was interested, but I wouldn't say I was particularly keen to really get into it. But that decision wasn't really made by me, funnily enough. The fact that I stepped foot into the dojo suggested to the sensei, Sano sensei, that I was there to join the club, and it's like I've said this many times before. It was like Hotel California. Once you've checked in, you can't check out. And so I started kendo the very next day, and I really didn't like it. And the reason why, and you're a kendo practitioner yourself, and as a beginner, kendo is a very difficult thing to come to grips with, to sort of get into, because everything that you're doing it seems so unnatural at first. Um, the form that you have to take is rigidly upheld, but at the same time, you're holding a sword out in front of your body, and you're keeping a very upright, straight posture, and you are moving with the same way with your right foot forward and your left foot back, and it just doesn't feel natural. Like if you anybody who's done fencing or some other sport, that you can crouch down and keep a wide stance and keep balance, but it feels very unbalanced and very unnatural. And from this position, you have to do all of these fundamental exercises like suburi, which is just sword swings over and over and over ad nauseum, until this unnatural stance and unnatural feeling becomes natural, and your body and your sword and your mind sort of melds together, and you don't have to think about it anymore. But to get to that point requires a lot of repetitive practice, hours each day, 7 days a week is what I was, the training regime that I was subjected to. And I was coming away with, painful muscles and blisters on my feet and my hands, and also being subjected to the rigorous sort of discipline that's required. Like, if you want to have a bit of a break because you're tired and you sit down and go and have a drink, suddenly you've got somebody shouting in your ear to get your ass back out on the floor and get back to practice, sort of thing. It's a completely different mindset, and completely different way of teaching and learning a sport than I'd ever experienced in New Zealand before, where it's a little bit more free flowing and not so tough on the discipline. You're more expected to sort of discipline yourself. But Japan, it was sort of like going through boot camp, and that was a shock to the system, not just kendo itself, but the whole what can you say, the whole way of doing things here. And the teacher, although I love him to bits, and he's had one of the biggest influences on my life at the time, it just seemed like violence and nastiness, like the drill sergeant or something. It was tough.
All these people are just saying, how do I sign up for this?
Yeah, exactly right. I'm not a very good promoter of it.
I'm wondering if they actually ever let you go and look at the judo dojo. Did you get a chance to look at judo as well?
I did, and interestingly, as a young kid, I can't remember how old would I have been. Probably about 5 or 6. I'd actually done judo for 1 year at one of the local clubs.
Okay.
And I enjoyed it, but it never really sort of captured my imagination, so I didn't last particularly long. So I had done it before.
Yes.
So like I said, the only two martial arts on offer at my school were judo and kendo, because they're the two mainstream martial arts in Japan. Yeah. I was a teenager at the time, and there was a very popular movie which has kind of made a bit of a comeback these days, Karate Kid, with Ralph Macchio and Pat Morita. If karate had been on offer, I absolutely, totally would have jumped at that and joined the karate club. But karate is it's not exactly mainstream in Japan, surprisingly. If you think of martial arts, Japanese martial arts, everybody immediately assumes karate as the big one, and it is internationally, but not in Japan. So I was only given really two choices, and of those two is the one that shocked me the most, that I decided to do.
Yeah, I've had a chance to speak to quite a high-level karate sensei, actually, and he has a very high regard for kendo. Very high. It's held very high, isn't it? And
it is. It's actually Kendo has had quite a large influence on other martial arts and the way that they've been developed in Japan. Karate, in particular, I don't want to bog people down with too much history, but just briefly, in the case of karate is not originally, you have to be careful how you say this, not originally a Japanese martial art. It's from Okinawa, and it only came to the Japanese mainland in the 1920s. And there was a fellow who's relatively well known internationally, because there's so many people that do karate around the world, but Funakoshi Gichin. He was kind of like the pioneer of karate in the mainland, and he brought it from Okinawa to Japan in the 1920s. And in fact, it was a judo founder, Kano Jigoro, and also some kendo teachers that really looked after him. And there's one kendo dojo in Tokyo in particular that provided Funakoshi with a place to train and teach students. And so there's always been a kind of a big brother, little brother relationship between kendo and the other martial arts to a certain extent, which is why it's generally held pretty high regard by other Budo as kind of like again, I have to be careful, but it's sort of like the pinnacle of Japanese martial arts in many ways.
Yes. What was that other dojo in Tokyo that you mentioned there?
It was Nakayama Hakudo, or otherwise known as Hiromichi, his dojo, and it was a very small dojo, but Nakayama Sensei provided him with, as I said, a venue and a place for him to teach the students when he was just getting started, basically.
You know, you touched on you touched a bit on that mind, body, spirit merging, or that those are my words, but that merging of the thought and the skill, and then the beingness, and then just not thinking. How do you think the Western mind copes? Because it is a little bit different how the Japanese body, they seem to be sort of centered down here more, whereas often we'll see Westerners sort of holding the sword, like the shinai, a bit like this. Or do you feel it's a Western mind thing as well?
It's sort of difficult to answer. I mean, there's so many levels to this question, so many ways that it could be answered. In my experience, well, really, there's no one size fits all, and I think, like, indeed, we think. Well, let me give you an example. A few years ago, I was asked to consult for a video game called For Honor. I don't play video games at all. I keep well away from them because I know that I would become very addicted very quickly and I wouldn't get any work done. But this For Honor was quite a big deal, I understand. And there's a company in Canada called Ubisoft. Is it Ubi or Ubi? Ubisoft, which is quite a major video game making company. And they asked me to go over there. I spent a few days, about 2 or 3 days, consulting for the movie, because not the movie, the game. It sort of is like a movie, though. It's incredible. The graphics are amazing, and what they wanted me to help with was the graphics. And what I mean by that is that the game itself is a combat game, and you have a number of characters like Vikings and knights, and of course the samurai. And the way they they sort of got the movement for all of the characters was they stick, basically the ping pong balls on a stunt man.
Yeah.
A bit like how they filmed Gollum in Lord of the Rings, right?
Okay. Yes.
And so they sort of wield their weapons and they do their thing, and all this movement gets recorded, and that gets put into the programming for the characters. And it was really interesting. You see the knights and the Vikings, and of course they're built even the characters are built up like really strong upper body, and they're sort of waving around these massive swords and axes and things, and it's all really, the way it's projected is it's all coming from upper body strength. Whereas the person who was doing this, the samurai character, pretty much used the same sort of movement as what they were doing for all the other ones as well. And so you get the samurai waving this sword around with all this power, and that was my role. That's where I came into it and said, well, no, really, this is how you would wield this weapon. You'd take a much lower stance, and you'd be not so much focusing on the upper body, but focusing your energy and your intent into your lower body, into your hips with that lower stance, and just letting the weight of the weapon sort of provide the force. Obviously, there's a little bit of use with the tenouchi, or the subtle movements of the hands and the fingers, which we're always taught about in kendo. And so I had to sort of try and retrain the person who was doing the movements to actually look more like how you would be doing a martial art, like the way that we do kendo, or with the hip centric movement, not the upper body, but really the lower body is where it's at. And so it sort of drove home to me the kind of different ways in which, broadly speaking, Westerners and Japanese people, or Asian, like I think it's the same in the Chinese martial arts as well, as sort of use different parts of the body. But having said that, I don't think that it's necessarily foreign to Westerners either, because I think martial arts are so ubiquitous now. They've been around for, well, particularly since the post-war period. Japanese martial arts, not only Japanese, but other martial arts as well, pretty much, I would say, Japan's number one cultural export. I mean, you think about the number of people who have practiced Japanese martial art before. We're talking about millions upon millions upon millions of people, perhaps billions. And so this kind of movement, or this idea of body mind, not dichotomy, but actually together, is not necessarily that foreign to Westerners either, I don't think.
I think it's quite it's coming into our awareness more and more. So I suppose these practices are a chance to build on that. Let's talk a little bit about respect, because it's something that really is perforated right through Japanese culture. And it just seems to me, I'd love to hear your thoughts about the way the dojo is really working together and helping each other in a training way, rather than us versus them kind of feeling. What would you like to share about that?
Well, a dojo, and again, there's a little bit of disparity between the kind of martial art and also the level of dojo, whether it's school or community. Yes. And ultimately, it really boils down to who's running the thing. So the personality of the sensei has a massive influence on the culture of the dojo. But generally speaking, a dojo is considered a sacred place in a way. We always bow as we enter the dojo. We take off our hats and we greet all the people within it. We take our shoes off and we put them neatly in the shelf, or wherever the designated space is. And when we move around in the dojo, we move around with always a sense of, or feeling of deference. I'm not particularly religious in the monotheistic sense, but my observations, and when I have gone to a church or a mosque or any other kind of religious place, I get the same kind of feeling. Mm-hmm. So it's not the sort of place where you go around and play silly buggers and use profanities and just act like a general ass. You've got to be on your best behavior, and it's sacred in a sense, but there's many reasons for that. What we're practicing in a dojo, even the name dojo means place of the way, and so there is a kind of a religious underpinning to that, in that what you're doing is not just a sport. It's not just a competitive activity. It's a place where, through the medium of the techniques that you are learning and the competitive bouts that you're having with your peers or your sensei or whatever, you are not only trying to better your technical ability and your understanding of, in my case, kendo, but a very important part of that is to also better yourself as a human being. So you're trying to expel or purge from your mind and also from your technical sort of armory any weaknesses or any holes or any chinks in your armor, as it were, or you're trying to, through learning the techniques and through engaging bouts, you're trying to better yourself as a human being. So in that sense, the people that you're practicing with are not opponents, they're not enemies, but they're collaborators in a mutual activity, or a mutual goal of trying to be the best person that you can. There's an old saying, "Kyo no ware wa kino ni katsu desu," so the self of today must be better than the self of yesterday. And so you're always looking for that that self-improvement. It doesn't always come, of course. Just because you do kendo or martial art doesn't mean to say that you're going to be a good person or a better person. But this is one of the really important goals, and that's the role of the sensei and the seniors in the club is to guide that. And so in order to facilitate that, you have to have respect in the dojo, and you have to have respect between the people. Even if you don't particularly like a person, you have to respect them. And another reason why you need that respect is because what you're doing in the dojo, different to a church or a mosque, you're not just sitting there listening to a sermon and praying. You're actually going out there and fighting, and you are engaged in combat. And of course, it's we're not using live blades, and nobody's going to get killed, but it is very intense and it is very fierce, and there is always the possibility that somebody will get injured, sometimes seriously injured, or emotions will come to the fore, and people get carried away. Part of the kendo training is you've got to get carried away, but you've also got to be able to rein that in as well. So this emotional control is such a crucial part of any martial art, and that's something that you are actually training by experience in the fray. And that is why respect in the dojo is absolutely crucial, because without it, it will turn into something like what we saw on Capitol Hill yesterday.
Perhaps a little kendo attitude might go quite well in other fields.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of in the fray, what is the toughest training session that you've ever experienced? What happened there?
Well, again, it's a matter of perception. So I don't know if I could call it the toughest, but the one that really woke me up, let me say, was when I was at high school. And I sort of mentioned before that sports mentality or club mentality, club culture at schools in New Zealand and Japan are so different. And when I came to Japan, it was like boot camp, in that you're supposed to enjoy your sport. I didn't really have time to enjoy it because I was trying to survive every day. And just to offer a point of comparison, New Zealand sports are very much divided into into seasons.
Mm.
And so in winter, I would play, in my case, I would play soccer. And in summer, I would play cricket. Um, so I'd belong to two different sports clubs in my school at once. In fact, I belonged to four different sports clubs because I also played volleyball and I also played tennis.
Mm.
So I was involved in four sports at once. So I'd say that soccer was my main one. But the reason why you can do that in New Zealand is because, as I mentioned, sports are divided up into seasons, and also you don't play your sport or train in your sport every day. You train in, even if soccer was my main one, I'd train in soccer 2 times a week, and then I'd have a match on Saturday against another school. And on the other days, I'll be playing another sport because I wanted to. So it's all very much voluntary, and it's very enjoyable because you're not doing it every day. It's not a chore. It's something you look forward to. When I came to Japan, it was one club that you belong to. You're not given the option of joining other clubs. Just one club, and you train in that club every day for the whole year and for the entire time that you're at the school. So when I joined the Kendo club, or when I was press ganged into the Kendo club,
Yeah.
I it was every single day from on weekdays I would train from 4 o'clock until 6 o'clock, and then Saturday it would be from 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Then on Sunday it would be from 9 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock. And then Monday will be back to 4 to 6 sort of thing. So it's every single day. And then when you have school holidays, you think, phew, I get some time off club. Oh no. That's when you have gushkus and training camps and practice matches with other schools. It really is your job. In fact, it was so rigorous and so hard that when you get home, there's no way that I could study. I just dropped dead into my futon. I woke up the next morning and I was like, oh God, here we go, another day of this sort of thing. And it was just ongoing like that. So at first for me, it was a real culture shock in that sense. And the only reason I kept up with it was because the members of the Kendo club became my best friends. So I was going to my club not so much for the Kendo. That was an unfortunate thing that I had to do to be with my friends. It was to meet my buddies because they taught me not only Kendo, but they taught me so much about Japan and the relationships that were supposed, the way you speak to your senpais and your senseis and many other aspects of. I mean, the dojo is like a microcosm of Japanese society, right? So I learned a lot about Japan. But what the big thing that really, it was a big changing point for me to get to your question was, what was the toughest training? Well, just to add a little bit of context, and again, I know I'm not promoting Kendo very well by talking about this, but every day the sensei would come to the dojo. Some days he wouldn't come, and so we just practice on our own without the sensei there, and it was joyous when he wasn't there. But when we're practicing, when you hear the sliding door opening, like that, it's like, oh God, he's come. Oh God, here we go. What are we going to have to do now? What's he going to put us through? And every day, one of us would be a sacrificial lamb for everybody else. And what I mean by that, I can see the shock on your face right now, Paul. He would put on his gear, and everybody would line up to fight the teacher, fight the sensei, and it usually finishes pretty quickly. And you'd get a little bit of advice. You might get a whack in the backside for not trying hard enough or something like that. But you'd get a little bit of advice, and then you go away and you practice with the others. But every day there'd be one person who just, for whatever reason, didn't make the grade, and the sensei decided, well, it's time that I taught you a bit of a lesson. And inevitably that person would be stuck with the sensei for 30 minutes or 40 minutes, being taken through their paces and basically just being ground into the floor, and shouted at, and just basically turned into a desperate, blubbering heap of sweat and tears. So every day there was one person who would end up, taking one for the team. But I always got off pretty light, because, I'm the exchange student, and, I'm only just starting Kendo, and probably if that happened to me, I might ring the police and get the sensei arrested for, for violence against a student. And, I didn't have the same kind of cultural mindset to accept that and let go of it, because it would be totally unacceptable in a New Zealand sports scene or sports club, from no matter how hard you try and justify it. But one day, what happened? I was pissed off with life in general, but Japan in particular, because I'm sure you can empathize with me here, Paul. Can you remember the first time that you ever experienced Japanese summer?
Oh, I prefer winter. I'll just say it like that.
Right.
Much rather train in winter as well.
Yeah, I mean, the winters, the springs, and the autumns, they're fairly similar to New Zealand, all said and done. But the summer is just something else. And I never expected the summer to be so hot and humid and horrible. It was just disgusting. And I'd been in Japan for 6 months already, and it'd been fairly comfortable season-wise, until suddenly it became very hot. And that didn't matter as far as Kendo was concerned. You still had to go into the dojo, put on all of that training equipment, and run around for 2 hours or more screaming and yelling. And it was hell on earth. And it really affected. That was when culture shock really set in for me. It was after about 6 months and living in Japan, and it was just physically and mentally too much to bear. And your body physically don't know how to deal with this heat, and having to go and do Kendo, and that was the last thing I wanted to do. And I went to training as usual, and I was just angry. I was an angry young man, and very hot and very tired and very, just not very enthusiastic about Kendo, and lined up for the sensei. And I thought, you know what? Stuff this. I was going to say something a lot worse, but stuff it. So I just let go. I just went bang straight into the sensei and hit him, and then smashed into him and knocked him back. And he's a big, solid man, and I was only a wispy little, 50-kilogram little sprite. And bugger me if I didn't knock him back with Taiatari, okay, which was, no big deal. But for me, it was kind of like some amazing victory. And I thought, yeah, take that.
I can sense this going downhill rapidly.
I wish I did, but I didn't at the time. And I thought, I'm going to do that again. Bang! Yeah, take that. And I still remember it so vividly. I remember the sparkle in his eye from behind his mask. And he goes, "Oh, kyo yaru na." Okay, which means, right, you're on. let's go for it. And then he replied with similar, if not a little bit more force, and bang! And I was like, it's like, when you play marbles and you flick the marble and the marble hits the other marble, that one stops, or a billiards or something like that, bang, and the ball goes flying back. And I sort of flew back about a meter or 2 meters or something. And I thought, bloody hell, what just happened?
Yeah.
And then Sano Sensei comes up to me again. I still remember this. It's like a giant wave coming over me. And I thought, holy crap, if he does the same thing, right behind me is the wall. And I'm going to get squashed into that wall. What do I do? Okay, of course, it was all instantaneous, but I did the worst possible thing that anybody who does kendo could do. As soon as he was coming forward to strike me at full force, I ran away. Okay, I dodged the bullet, and he went flying into the wall and put a hole in it.
Going more downhill.
And then he goes, "You little shite." Reason being is, like, if I just held my ground and taking it front on, it takes incredible bravery and discipline to be able to do that. But I took the easy way out and ran away, right? Which is totally counter to the kendo spirit of tackling all problems front on. And this was, I guess, the signal to Sano Sensei to actually teach me what kendo was all about the discipline, the valor that you need, taking things front on instead of trying to be sneaky or escape consequences. And so he basically took me through my paces. That was the day that I became the sacrificial lamb for everybody. And he must have known that I was at the stage where I could do it, where I could actually manage it. Now, in kendo, just for people who are not familiar with kendo, there's a grueling exercise called kakari geiko, or attack practice, where basically you just attack constantly without stopping until the person who is guiding you through this tells you to stop. So it's just a one-sided constant attack practice. And just to give you an idea of how grueling it is, you imagine running 100 meters, okay, 100-meter sprint, okay, as fast as you can, okay. That's the intensity that we have to do this with. But imagine running that 100 meters as fast as you can while screaming at the same time. Yeah, which is what we do in kendo. Okay, so that adds another dimension of the pain and the tiredness that comes with it. Now imagine that you thought you were only supposed to run 100 meters doing that, but that 100 meters turns into 400 meters and then 1,000 meters and then 3,000 meters. It just doesn't stop. It just doesn't stop.
No announcement of how far it is.
You just don't know. The only thing that you know is that you have to do it properly to the best of your ability, throwing everything that you have out so that the sensei is satisfied that you have taken that next step. And so I ended up just kept going and going and going, and many times halfway through, or mid-attack, it's just like my legs are gone. I was just so fatigued, and it was so hot. I was dehydrated as hell, and didn't know what the hell I was doing there. And it's just, oh, what do you do? Do you just stop and just walk out? Well, that was what basically caused me the problem in the first place, running away. Or do you just keep going? And in New Zealand, I would have stopped, of course, but I couldn't. There's this imperative that you can't do that in kendo. You got to keep going until it's okay to stop. And so many times, I remember this so vividly. So I felt like I was about to die, and it actually started feeling quite good. It's like, oh, I'm going to die, but hey, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. This is cool. And suddenly all of the fear disappeared, and all of the pain and the fatigue just sort of melted and disappeared, and I was just sort of like floating and at one with everything. And then, even though I thought this is it, I can't do it anymore, suddenly you find your second wind and your third wind and your fourth wind, and you just keep going. And it's like, I don't know how the hell I did it. But when it had all finished, I looked at the clock. It had been a good 45, 50 minutes that I'd been doing this kakarigeko. And it's like, what the hell just happened? And it was kind of like a turning point in my life. It wasn't as if I was actually looking for anything or searching for anything, but suddenly I felt like I found it. And that was pretty much, it was probably I wouldn't say it's the hardest training I've ever been through, but it was the first time that I'd ever experienced anything like this. It was quite an what can you say? It was just nothing short of a religious experience in a way.
Yeah.
It changed my life in so many ways when I look back on it now. Just that one encounter is the only reason that I'm here, I think.
It's quite exceptional, and I'm thinking quite a few people would have really enjoyed that story, and maybe they're deciding they don't need to go through that themselves, having heard it written said so well.
I don't know. I don't recommend it. Well, to be honest, I do. But it's when you talk about that to people who've never done kendo before or don't know what it is, or anything in general, it's just like without the context. Yeah, it's quite frightening. It's almost, you could almost call it abuse, but it's not, because there is a connection between me and my sensei, and it's like we were talking about before about that respect. Without that respect, that could not happen, both ways. And it was because of that he's pulling me, taking me to my limit. I'm up against, the edge on the cliff, looking out over the abyss, and it's like, well, jump and see what happens. You might surprise yourself. And sometimes it takes somebody to take you to that point and just give you a little bit of a nudge. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it yourself. And once you do it, it's like, holy crap, this was not as bad as I thought. And I learned so much about myself on that one moment. One of the most important things was that limits be damned. It's like I can push myself a little bit harder. And the reason it was so intense was because I was young, physically very fit, and I've been training for this pretty much every day, I think, and preparing for it. Doesn't mean to say if you start kendo when you're in your 20s or your 30s or your 40s or your 50s, you're going to do the same thing. But you practice kendo within, within your own boundaries, within your own limits, but you're always pecking away at those limits. So the experience that I had at high school is not some kind of experience that somebody's going to have later on in life if they want to start kendo or a martial art. But the whole idea is just to take you to your own edge, wherever that is, and to have the mark of a wonderful sensei as somebody who knows where that is and when enough is enough. Yes. And so I was very lucky in that respect.
Yes, it's not a case of a teacher having a bad day and taking it out on his student. It's very different, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Although that sort of thing can happen, and that's really dangerous, and there is risk involved in that, and that's why it's so important to find the right sensei, somebody who you really can trust and really are able to entrust yourself to. Yes. And that's why the role of a sensei is just so important, so much responsibility.
Yes.
It's not just a matter of he or she is all Japan champion or world champion and is such and such done. It's how is that person as a human being? Mm-hmm. And we all know that you find people that you get on with well and people that you don't. Same with your sensei. just because that sensei is famous or incredibly formidable in terms of competitive prowess and stuff like that doesn't mean to say that they're the right sensei for you. So part of the martial arts journey, the really important part, is spending time to find the right sensei. And I was just lucky because I didn't know any of this, and I just landed on my feet. Well, I landed on my ass many times because of it too.
Yes, well, you did well. Speaking of performance, you've actually you've had quite an adventure that has included Kendo World Championships representing New Zealand. You've captained New Zealand, and I believe you've coached New Zealand too. And now your brother's also heavily involved and has been for some time, I think. But what would you love to share about Kendo World Championships, your experience there, and representing your country as well, as even though you're probably as much Japanese as you are Kiwi these days?
Yeah. Again, that's another matter of perception, isn't it? But World Champs, the first time I went to the World Champs was in 1991, and that was in Toronto in Canada. And I'd only been doing Kendo for about 2.5, 3 years by then, so I wasn't particularly experienced in competitive Kendo.
That's a huge jump, though, Alex. 2.5 years of Kendo and World Champs. That must have been quite a shock to the system.
Yeah, well, what was a shock to the system was I'd only ever seen Kendo in Japan before, and when I went to the World Champs for the first time, I'd never seen so many non-Japanese people doing Kendo. I was like, wow, this is huge. There's a lot of people around the world who are really dedicated and a really good level as well. So it was kind of a wake-up call for me, seeing the scale of Kendo's growth internationally. And that's been one of the really fascinating things for me over the years. I mean, my first foray into the World Champs was in 1991, as I just said. But now, 2021, okay, it's 30 years later, and the amount or the level that World Kendo has progressed to in that 30 years is just astounding. Of course, the Koreans are a formidable, would beat Japan on any given day. But not only that, but other countries like the United States is the only country so far that has beaten Japan. And they've got not a particularly large population of Kendo people compared to Japan. They say in Japan there's 1.5 million. In the States, who knows? I wouldn't like to guess, but I'll be looking maybe 5,000 to 10,000 people perhaps. And the level of skill amongst their top level competitors, Europe, look at the French, you look at the Hungarians, and many other countries, up and coming as well. They've taken Kendo to a new level internationally. To the extent where Japan cannot take it for granted anymore, and they spend an awful lot of time and an awful lot of money prepping their national team for the World Champs. It never used to be the case, but it is now for sure, because, as I said, any given day it could go anywhere. Yes. So what I've learned over all these years is that, as I said, Kendo is really making incredible inroads internationally. There's still many issues with international Kendo, which I won't bore you with the details because we go on forever and ever talking about them. But one of the big issues that is being faced by international Kendo now is the need to really get good quality shimpan. Of course, there are good quality shimpan internationally, but we need more. And,
yes, you're talking about the judging of fights, basically.
Yes, sorry, the judging, the referees. So that's something for international Kendo to really address with a lot more proactiveness from now on, I think.
Well, it's so difficult, isn't it? I mean, even at lower levels, everyone's invited. At a certain point, you start practicing being a shimpan, but it's so difficult it's so fast.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, you've got to be a practitioner.
yes.
It's different to like other sports like baseball umpire or the or rugby referees. They are professional umpires or referees now. They don't play baseball or rugby competitively.
Mm.
Um, their job is to remain fit as an adjudicator. But kendo is different in that sense. That one of the main criteria for a shimpan in kendo is that that person must be actively practicing. If you're not practicing kendo, you're not actually in the dojo practicing kendo, you'll not be able to fulfill your duties, your obligations as a shimpan properly, because you'll miss so much, because it's just bang, bang, bang.
Yeah.
But you're not only looking at the point that's getting scored, you've got to recognize the entire process and the build up to it. And the only way you can do that is if you are actually experiencing it in your training. Also, there are the top level, the highest level competitors will be unleashing techniques of such a high technical quality that the shimpan must also be able to identify that through their own practice. Otherwise, they won't recognize it as a technique. So it's an incredibly hard job being shimpan, especially in this day and age where everybody puts matches up on YouTube now, and most of the viewers will go through commenting on how the referee screwed that one up or didn't call that or what's wrong with that one, sort of thing. It's one of the hardest jobs in the world, but I think it's one of the most important jobs for the future growth and propagation of kendo, and that's where I will be turning my attention to from now. I've been through the competitive side, I've been through the coaching side, and now it's time to take the plunge again. I mean, it's not a comfortable job, it's a thankless job, but it's a very important one, is to do the refereeing, the shimpan side of things as well.
Do you see yourself having your own dojo? I mean, I don't know how you're structured at the moment, but like you had your sensei when you were 17, do you see yourself participating as a kendo sensei with your own dojo, or how do you see that? What do you want to do?
Well, yes. I mean, I'm not particularly hung up on the idea of being the sensei of my own little castle or anything like that at all. But I actually do have a dojo in Christchurch in New Zealand, which I formed the club actually after I returned to New Zealand from my first year in Japan.
Yes.
After only doing kendo for 1 year, I went back to New Zealand thinking I might go to university, but not really sure, and quite liberated because I didn't have to do kendo anymore like I did every day in Japan, but started experiencing kendo cold turkey. Okay, and started getting the jitters and annoying the hell out of people every time I picked up an umbrella. So I was put in contact with some people in Christchurch who had martial arts experience who wanted to do kendo. And three of us got together and we made a kendo club in 1988. And that club is still running today. And after the earthquake in Christchurch in 2011, where our training venue was destroyed, I managed to get together the funds to buy a little warehouse and turn that into a standalone kendo dojo, which is operating at the moment. So I do actually have a club and a dojo, which I'm very proud of, but unfortunately I very rarely get back to it. In normal circumstances, 2 or 3 times a year when I go back to New Zealand, but thanks to COVID, that's not going to happen for a while. And the other main venue for my training is at the university that I teach at, which is Kansai University. And Kansai University has a very strong kendo tradition and a very good club with about 50 or 60 students, some of whom are there on scholarship for Kendo, so they're a very high competitive level. And so, again, in normal circumstances, I'd be training with them every day and coaching them, um, and as one of the senseis in the club. So that's just, I mean, to me, the coaching and the senseiing bit is really just a part of my own journey. So I don't particularly see myself any different to the students that I'm training, other than I've just been around a little bit longer, and I will use my experience and impart my experience for their benefit when I see that it is useful. But at the same time, I'm also learning a lot by training with them as well. And I'm not saying that to be sort of superficially humble. That's just really the way it is.
Yes, yes, yes. Alex, have you got a few more minutes? Because there's something I really wanted to ask you about the Rugby World Cup. Now, you were discovered and invited to support an international team, and you had quite a wonderful World Cup experience. I mean, what can you tell us about that? I know it wasn't the All Blacks.
Well, actually, that was really one of the highlights of my life so far. That experience with the World Cup Rugby, which was held in Japan in 2019, and the organisers for the World Cup put out sort of the word that they were looking for people who could help the visiting national teams as a part of their group as either interpreter or team liaison officer or assistant team liaison officer. And basically, I went through the interviews and was selected as a team liaison officer, which is essentially the assistant to the team manager. And you are asked what team would you like to be attached to? And of course, being a New Zealander, it was All Blacks all the way. But the All Blacks already had their stuff sorted out well beforehand, and they already had their stuff in place before any of this took place, I think. And so I was asked, are there any other teams? And I actually said any one of the Pacific Island teams I'd be really happy to help, because they're coming over here on a shoestring budget compared to the number one tier countries like the All Blacks and England and Australia and South Africa. They've got incredible resources, whereas some of the second tier nations, they don't have anywhere near the resources that these other teams have. So I figured, coming from the Pacific myself, I'd very much, if I'm not going to be with the All Blacks, which is just an ego thing more than anything, but if I can't do that, then maybe I can actually be of genuine help to, some of the Pacific nations like Samoa or Fiji or Tonga. But as it turns out, and for reasons unbeknownst to me, even to this day, I was attached to the Welsh national team, and the Welsh team, of course, is a tier one rugby nation. Very, it's full of professionals, yes. A very professional outfit, and I was sort of wondered why I ended up with the Welsh, but God, I'm glad I did. It was just an incredible time, because the Welsh, every team is different in the way that they approach their preparation and the team environment. And talking to the other team liaison officers who are, attached to other teams, afterwards I realised even more how privileged I was, because the whole idea with the way the Welsh set it up was they don't want any superfluous hangers-on. They want the bare minimum. So my group was without a translator. we only had myself, my assistant, and also a security officer. There was 3 of us for this massive team. And we were a little bit worried at first, because it's like, how the hell are we supposed to do all of our duties, which goes from anything you can imagine. It would include interpreting, it includes getting the players' laundry sorted out, it includes getting the practice venue set up, cleaning up the practice venue, getting players' meals organized, or trips on their days off, everything you can imagine. It was really, you wake up at 6 in the morning and you're going to about 2 in the morning some days, because you inevitably end up going out with management, having a few drinks as well. And you're with the team until they lose. And when they lose, they're given a certain window where they have to leave the country. That is the rules. But Wales, they just kept winning, which means that I kept, we were there for a long time, almost 6 weeks with this frenetic, incredible lifestyle. But what was great about it was, as I said before, we're local people that are joining their group that is they've been in training for 6 months, if not longer, as a group already, and we're just for their joining them for the final part of their journey. So we're kind of outsiders, but that's exactly what they didn't want us to be. And that's why they didn't have any superfluous, positions. They just had the bare minimum. And as soon as we were in there, we were part of the team. We were part of the management team, and we were welcomed by everybody unconditionally. And it was just one of the most, being in a high pressure environment like that with the players, they sort of become your friends, but you've got to look after them, and you're looking after their best interests all the time. How can we make it better for the players, and the management? And after that experience, there's not a day that goes by where I don't think about it. I'm even wearing Welsh get up today, actually, funnily enough. They've become just, I probably won't see most of them ever again, but they've become friends that I'll never forget. Really sad thing happened last year. Wales was actually supposed to go to New Zealand for some test matches against the All Blacks. And on their way to New Zealand, they were going to stop off in Japan and have a one-off match against the Japanese national team. And they contacted me and my assistant to say if we could be their liaison again while they're here. And it's got, hell yeah, of course. But because of COVID, it got cancelled. Oh. But I think just to finish this little story off, one of the greatest memories I have was in the 3rd place playoff. Wales had to play the All Blacks. So here it was, Wales playing my home country, New Zealand, in the the highest arena for world rugby.
Yes.
And I was I remember with my 2 assistants and with the Welsh management and the players all facing off against the All Blacks. I was in the group as well, all holding arms, singing the Welsh national anthem and having the New Zealand national anthem sung back to me. It was just like kind of surreal, but a really beautiful moment. It's like, really, it's not about nationality. It's about being a part of a tight group of people that are bound together with a common cause and just nothing but respect for each other and for the opposition. It's just a memory that I still think about, trying to decipher its significance in my life. I'm sure it'll take on greater significance as I get older.
Well, it's pretty amazing. It made me think because I was going to ask you to share a pearl of wisdom, and in fact, you might have just painted the picture of the ultimate experience for humanity right there. And with that respect and shared, even amongst all our differences, I thought that was really magic. And thanks so much for sharing that generously. Do you have anything you'd like to say as we wrap up here with this great interview? Would you like to say anything to everyone?
Uh, well, I think I've said quite a lot already. um, just on that, on I mentioned cricket a few times because I used to love playing cricket as a kid, and uh, the last few weeks I've been um, hiding away from the cold in Japan. It's very cold at the moment, and because it's the shore guts of the New Year season, don't have to go to work, and I've been watching the live stream uh, broadcasts of New Zealand cricket playing the Pakistan cricket team in New Zealand, and they were playing that in Christchurch in the Hagley Oval. And it was a very entertaining series of matches between New Zealand and Pakistan. And as a result of New Zealand beating Pakistan this time, for the first time in their history, they are now ranked the #1 Test cricket side in the world, which is no mean feat. But when I was watching this, apart from the sublime skill of the New Zealand captain Kane Williamson and the other players, and cricket, kendo's over in an instant, bang. Cricket goes on for days.
That's right.
And the discipline and the focus, the concentration, the physical and mental fitness that's required to play this game. One slip and you're out, right? And it's just, I've been watching this cricket. I haven't watched it for many years, but I've had the opportunity this time, and I've just been amazed at the sport itself. But what was really moving about it was something that I found is very much in common with the kind of respect that we've been talking about that's expected in Budo, in the martial arts, and Kendo. And I remember Kane Williamson the other day got his second double century, which is an incredible feat in batting in cricket. And without fail, every one of the Pakistani cricketers came up and they were shaking hands with Kane, congratulating him like he was a teammate, even though he was from the opposition. And I just kept seeing this kind of thing happening between the New Zealand and the Pakistani cricketers over the course of the match. That kind of respect and it sort of gave me hope in a way, considering all the shit that's going on in the world today. Especially now we don't get to see so much sports or international sports because of COVID. Thank goodness New Zealand has managed to subdue it to the extent that we can have international matches. But this, I think that many people around the world without anything else to watch may have been watching this and seeing this respect and this camaraderie between people from New Zealand and from Pakistan, completely different cultures, different language, different religion. The one thing they've got in common is the cricket, and it's because of that they're able to interact as friends.
Yes.
It was really quite moving to watch, and so I think just little glimpses of stuff like that over the last year, it's been pretty tough. I imagine the next year is going to be pretty tough, but we just can't forget our humanity and sports, although it's often not the case when it becomes so competitive and so nasty. It's moments like this where you can see there's hope for us yet.
Yes.
I don't know if that's sharing anything of any pearl of wisdom.
I think it's wonderful.
It's just an impression that I got the other day.
Thanks so much for sharing that, and I know people are going to just love that, and I'm right with you on that. And I think we're all doing our bit, and we can do our bit, and we can remember through stories like this. Oh, we actually can. It's really quite simple things, isn't it? And those guys are still going for it and giving everything, but they don't you don't have to hate each other, it seems. You can actually just be genuine. That's what sport's about.
Supposed to be.
Yeah. Or maybe the whole world's a dojo, Alex.
Well, it should be.
Well, Alex, look, Alex Bennett Sensei, thank you very much for your time, and had a wonderful time myself. And I know people are going to just love hearing about it and what an adventure you're having. And I just wish you many more wonderful adventures moving forward, and looking forward to hearing about it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Thanks for the invitation, and look forward to catching up with you soon. I know that Tokyo's going through, well, it's just had the state of emergency issued, hasn't it? Again,
Yeah.
for the second one.
Yeah. But it feels low key. It feels like people just work with it. It's not stressful. So we're okay.
Well, take care of yourself, and look forward to crossing swords with you again sometime soon, mate.
Thank you, Alex.